Jeremy Corbell.
Hey everybody, thanks for having me back again today. Wow, I just got out of editing a movie, come here to join you guys, and had to whip together this presentation, current and modern, because so much of this footage I've never been able to show anybody. This is the case of Bob Lazar. Who in this audience is unfamiliar with the claims of Bob Lazar? Don't be shy, raise your hands. I need to know. Cool, that's going to change. All right. So this case is really close to my heart because it is the reason, most likely, that I got interested in UFOs at all. This was before I started looking into the subject. It was before I even knew anything about the subject. Probably like most of you, I heard Bob Lazar's claims, and that's what inspired me to try to find out, is he telling the truth? The central question about Bob Lazar and his story, if he's telling the truth, it's huge, it's game-changing. But there's that nagging question, do you believe Bob Lazar? So I'm not going to try to convince you one way or the other. I'm going to just show you my journey in trying to get closer to that truth. For those of you that I've never met, I'm an investigative filmmaker, self-proclaimed. I make films and I investigate things. I think anybody with an iPhone these days can be an investigative filmmaker. Eventually you have to put the film out, the movies out. And I've luckily been able to do that recently. It just kind of started after all these years. I can put this footage out. There will probably be a lot of questions after the presentation about Bob Lazar, so I will leave some room for that, for those of you that want to talk about that, because it's a complex case. But I have to take you all the way back to 1989 in order to start this story. So again, my curiosity was weaponized when I heard Bob's claims. He was on the radio with my mentor in journalism, George Knapp, and I heard them talking about the propulsion system that Bob said he back-engineered at a sub-base of Area 51 called S4. Nobody had ever heard about S4. It was not a subject of conversation. Nobody even knew about the area that he was claiming this was going on. Totally new information. But the part that stuck with me was the way he described propulsion. That was my interest. Typically, if you want to make something move forward, you have to have something pushing back. It's really simple. But the way he described this propulsion system was completely counterintuitive. His claim was that these non-terrestrial craft, these flying saucers that he saw and had a chance to try to work on one of the propulsion systems, worked by generating gravity waves. And if you can generate a gravity wave, and you can distort or amplify a gravity wave, you can distort space-time. Space, time, and gravity, they all operate together. So if you affect one, you affect the others. Basic physics. The way that he described it, the best way I can imagine it is exactly how he described it. Put a bowling ball on a mattress and push your fist down on the mattress, and the bowling ball will roll towards your fist, right? So it's a completely different type of propulsion. It's like as if you're falling into where you're wanting to go. You're not pushing anything out. So that was just crazy. That was a wild concept to me. His claims went everywhere. What Bob Lazar claimed, whether you believe his claims or not, something that is undeniable, is the effect that his words had on the world. You know, words are weapons. They're used as weapons. Propaganda, that's how things work. His words were weapons. They sliced through the imagination of the American public and then the international public. This was in Omni magazine. You might recognize one of the most iconic pictures of Bob Lazar with his geeky Coke bottle glasses. And he said that he worked on alien propulsion for the United States military. But in 30 years now, he has rarely made himself available. He doesn't talk about it, wants to get on with his life, and getting to know Bob. There's a lot of really good reasons for that. But most people, that's the image in their mind that they have of Bob Lazar. However, it's a new day. Bob is again talking, and he's talking to me, and he's allowing me to finally put his story in documentary film form after 30 years. This is a guy that has never profited off of his UFO celebrity. He never sought it. He doesn't like the attention. But he simply is telling a story, and it's up to you whether or not you believe him. He just wants to make sure at least you know his story. And then it's up to you. And there's more to that. But we have to go back all the way to how this started. So I'm taking you way back. The world's best-known secret base. I love that. The reason you know about Area 51 is because of Bob Lazar. It's because of Bob Lazar, George Knapp, and a man named John Lear. You probably would have found out about it anyway. Our government has now finally acknowledged Area 51. But really, the reason that it's in your mind, anybody's mind, why it's become a meme and there's shot glasses and hot sauces, is because it became this household name for secrecy, for UFOs, and that is directly because of the reporting of George Knapp on what John Lear was saying and what Bob Lazar was saying. So that's kind of crazy. So I'm going to take you all the way back to the first time that Bob Lazar was ever mentioned publicly, and they didn't even say his name. They referenced a guy. So you're going to see in this video George Knapp on a little tiny show that he had that nobody watched. It was at a terrible time before he was this big-time investigative news reporter, right? And John Lear is his guest. John Lear is the godfather of conspiracy. I've known John for a long time. And he came out and started telling George all this wild stuff, and the ratings went through the roof. People wanted to know, is what John's saying true? So this is the first time Bob Lazar's name was not said, where he was referenced. So check it out. It's kind of rare footage.
Hello and welcome once again to On the Record. If you joined us last week, you heard some startling revelations about UFOs and the government cover-up about UFOs from noted UFO researcher John Lear. All right, you recently decided to take it upon yourself to try to get to the bottom of this major cover-up, what you say is a cover-up. You went up to Groom Lake, which you say is like a center of this UFO activity.
What happened is I was approached by a government theoretical physicist employed by the government who works on the saucers up at Groom Lake. He has seen the aliens. He is tired of the cover-up. He knows what a rip-off it is of how many billions of dollars we're wasting on trying to develop technology that's already been developed. And he told me when and where to stand, and we drove up there. We were actually there on 3 occasions.
I mean, the fact that that the military doesn't want you around a top-secret base doesn't mean there's flying saucers there.
No, it doesn't, except we had just seen one. The theoretical physicist that was with us that told us where to stand and what time to look. The next day he was told instead of driving to work to drive to a certain place. He was debriefed with a gun in his ear and asked why, he told this and told us that. And
well, he's worked in what capacity with them up there?
Theoretical physicist.
But I mean, what did he do around the saucers or whatever?
All I can tell you is that when you find out the truth, a month from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, you'll look back and you'll say, my God, the son of a gun was right.
Or maybe 30 years from now, he must have said, yeah. It's so great. You see George Knapp talking there, and he had never covered a UFO story. He was covering mob stories because he knew some of the mob guys. And you could see in his face, I love seeing that the first time he engages this topic with John Lear, he's skeptical, real skeptical. And he should be. It was wild then, it's wild now, what's being claimed. But John had credibility with the news station. John Lear had credibility because he brought forward some photographs. It's of Area 51 at lake level You will never see photos like this again. It was from 1977 where the security was a chain link. And I told you that story yesterday, how he snuck out the roll of film. It's pretty funny. It's a bar story. So John had credibility because he brought these photos forward, and they actually identified a stealth fighter and a MiG fighter, a Russian MiG that was being, I guess you'd say, back-engineered as well. So he had really brought the news station some interesting information. And John came to George's mentor in journalism, a man named Ned Day, and he said, here's all the UFO stuff. There's a secret program at Area 51, and they're reverse engineering alien spacecraft. And Ned Day's like, nope. I would have heard about it. No chance that's true, John. And then there's George Knapp, kind of new at the station. He said, hey, I'll look at those documents. Boy, did he not know that would completely alter his public identity for the rest of his life, you know? So what I like about this photo, you got Area 51 up there, and you have that little strip of tan to the right, and that is Papoose Lake. That is not a place that was known or is known as having anything happen. There's no runway there. Really, there should be nothing happening there, especially at that time. But that's where Bob said he worked. He did not work at Area 51. He worked at what he claims was called S4, a sub-base of Area 51, about 15 to 17 miles south on that little tan strip there called Papoose Lake. So that's the first thing to know, is that he's claiming to not have worked at Area 51. He's claiming to have worked near Area 51 on the same complex. But I want to still focus on John here because I spent a lot of time with John. I did film about 7 years of his life. I am sure that film will come out. To date, I put out a 20-minute short film, first episode on John. The whole series will be called Immaculate Deception. When it gets made, it's all filmed, when it gets cut and put out. But I'll just show you a little trailer for that, because John really is, he was my gateway drug to ufology. You know? You listen to John talk for a little while, and you start questioning everything about the universe. So I'll show you the little trailer, because I make films, so I figure they speak for me sometimes.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of On the Record. In the more than 5 years since we've been hosting these programs, no guest has inspired such a widespread and enduring audience response as has John Lear, son of the famed aviation pioneer and a world-class pilot in his own right. As many of you may know, though, Lear the son is best known for his research into UFOs, a phenomenon described by some as a worldwide hoax, described by others as the most important issue of our time.
It doesn't just happen, it's written the exact second that we're going to die.
I have talked to the highest people, and I know the truth. Earth is like Alice in Wonderland. Things get curiouser and curiouser. You certainly couldn't figure in your wildest dreams that it would be the most important thing when you can't see the objective.
Right, so John Lear is intimately connected to the Bob Lazar story. And the reason he's intimately connected to the Bob Lazar story is because I've talked with a lot of people that knew Bob Lazar before he became public, before he even worked, allegedly, in the program. And man, he would say things like, "Oh, I feel bad for John. You know, it comes from a prominent family, the Lear jet family, and he believes in UFOs." He like felt bad for him. So that was like Bob's standpoint on UFOs way before he ever found himself in the situation that he says he did. So staying back here in 1989, Bob comes forward. He says, "I worked on reverse engineering a propulsion system." They did not succeed in reverse engineering it. He said it was an impossible task. It was like, you know, dropping an iPhone out into the Stone Age and saying, "Make one." Yeah, he said it was absolutely impossible. And there was such control and there was such compartmentalization in these programs, he didn't even really know what he was supposed to be working on until he went a few times. And in fact, this is what he says. He says, when I saw the craft for the first time, he says, I started kind of chuckling inside because I thought, that's what all those UFO nuts were seeing in the skies and thinking they were extraterrestrial. They were ours, you know? So that was his thought when he first saw the craft. That's how kind of skeptical or analytical Bob was. He wouldn't take anything on face value. Still doesn't. You know, one of the most kind of interesting minds that I've met. So he did a lot to try to prove to you his story. He did probably more than you realize to try to prove to you his story. He says, "I've tried to prove my story. I can't. Under the scientific method, I can't prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that what I'm saying is true, so you're obligated not to believe me." And nowadays, he goes, "And if you don't believe me, pass it on." Because it's caused, you only see it from a personal perspective. You can only really see it from a personal perspective, how it has negatively influenced his life, what he's been through because of telling this story, which supposedly in a lot of people's mind isn't real. Yet there have been some real world consequences. Let me just get an idea from everybody's, you know, I'd really actually like to know how we're divided in this group. You know, who absolutely believes Bob Lazar, the absolutes, who's there? Okay. All right. Who maybe, maybe not, 50%. Where's the 50%ers? Undecideds. Okay. And then how many people absolute lying cockamamie bullshit? Where are you? Come on, it's okay. Oh, come on. You're hiding. Don't worry, I'll get you after. Right, okay, so that's about average. We all want to believe Bob Lazar. How can you not? You know, how cool would that be? So we all want to believe him. It doesn't mean it's true, but it also doesn't mean that it's false. So we're kind of stuck with that. A lot of you here believe him. You raised your hand, the majority of people, maybe because you want to believe him. We don't have all the evidence. So you're inclined to believe him. As you could tell from the news reports that George did, George dug deep. And that time period was so bizarre for the people that lived it. They were followed by people. George had 6 other witnesses that were coming off of the base to corroborate Bob Lazar's story or parts of Bob Lazar's story. All 6 of them declined to ever talk with him again after they were paid a visit and told that they would be harmed. And we're talking about George Knapp here. We're talking about people that do talk to him. And the stories of these people that couldn't tell their story to him afterwards, it's pretty incredible. But other people have come forward, and things have come to light over the last 30 years. And let's look at those things, and let's see if they provide proof or if they take away from Bob's story. So Bob Lazar began to talk in 1989, and just to give you another little clip so you can judge for yourself if what you think he was saying back then could be true or not true. Here's another little clip.
All right. Well, take it from the top then. I mean.
Okay. Well, go ahead.
how you got involved with this program.
I had sent resumes to several national labs around the country. I got a response from a couple of them. They said, we might have something in the near future you would be very interested in. You know, you say you work on little projects. I said, yeah, I have a particle accelerator in my master bedroom and things of that sort. And some time went by and they called me back in. They said there was a senior staff physicist that was leaving this organization, and they basically interviewed me for that job.
I don't know many people with particle accelerators in their master bedrooms, and I know a lot of nerds, I'll tell you that, you know? And I always found that really interesting. I know for a fact that Bob Lazar is highly intelligent. So he's got that going for him, and that's nice. I can tell for sure that he's smart, but I too was skeptical. I was probably like most of you that raised your hand. I was like, yes, I believe because I want to. It makes sense. But that's about all that we had. Until you really speak with someone, you can easily just dismiss them. If you're just talking about a name, you don't know them. You don't know their family. You don't know what they've been through. You can't even begin to imagine. None of us can. So we're all stuck with that because Bob really doesn't make himself available to get to know him. So I was skeptical, and I don't know. I talked with George, and George obviously encouraged me to talk with Bob. And I'm like, well, yeah, who wouldn't want to talk with Bob? Of course I want to talk to him. So George made a point. You got to talk with Bob, and you got to tell this story, and you got to do it yourself to really get to the bottom of it. He's like, but you got to be the luckiest guy on the planet for that to happen. And he kind of explains that to me here.
You have to cover the story of Bob Lazar, and the only way to do that is to talk to Bob. And I don't know if it'll talk to you or not, but you need to try. Well, it's all going to be circumstance for you. Is the moment that you approach him, the mood that he's in, what else is going on in his life at the time. You might hit the jackpot and get him at exactly the right time, and the universe is aligned and he's willing to talk about it. But you'd have to be awfully lucky. Because in general, Bob doesn't like to talk about it. I think he's very happy in his life. He's happy to have left the UFO stuff behind. He misses his friends. He misses John Lear. He misses Gene Huff, maybe even me to some extent. But he doesn't miss the UFO topic, and he doesn't miss talking about it, because ultimately it's disturbing. These are disturbing issues. They go to the heart of who we are as people, as human beings, the nature of reality itself. Is this a computer simulation? Are we all the product of an alien video game or some multi-dimensional movie, drive-in movie theater production or something? Big questions, disturbing answers, and Bob has never been comfortable in talking about them, never.
So that was about as encouraging as he can get. You're never going to get him. You have to be the luckiest guy on the planet. He doesn't like to talk about it because it's disturbing. It messed up his life. It's disturbing to everybody. Good luck, right? I'm pretty damn lucky. And the first time that I actually met Bob, like any of you really interested, I was like, okay, I want to ask him these questions directly. And I want to look him in the eye, and I want to see how he responds. I happen to have a camera, you know? And he happened to let me turn it on. And it had been a long time since he let somebody turn the camera on, right? So I thought, oh man, this is amazing. Let me see what he has to say. So I'll show you a little clip of that first time. I didn't know Bob at that time. I didn't know him. He was not a friend of mine. He's just, I accidentally got to be in the same place as him and had the camera and got to ask him questions. And I wanted to give the public just a glimpse. So I put this out. It's in a free 20-minute documentary, just a few minutes of Bob, so you could kind of be updated. This was a few years ago. But he talked about it in a different way. And that's what I found so interesting. It wasn't the Bob Lazar that I saw in all those videos from 25 years ago. It was 5 years ago when I filmed this. It was a different Bob. You know, it's like something had changed, and you'll see the way he talks about it. So I'm going to show you that little clip just so you get a update up till 5 years ago.
You know, look, you can nitpick anything, you know, to the point where you find inconsistencies, and then you can add those inconsistencies up and say, you know what, this can't be true. But the thing is, you can do that with factual events. And this was a factual event. Where the project is now, where the parts are now, you know, this is all 20 years ago. So I know there are alien craft here from another planet. I saw other ones, but I was inside one. I know it was not made on Earth. I know it was made with materials that we cannot fabricate, we cannot duplicate, and we've never been able to. I know it uses a power source that's so advanced that we could only dream of something along those lines, and the energy density on it is phenomenal. It's nothing that I would ever expect to see. I know that, you know, this is done in the highest levels of security, and, you know, that they use all kinds of methods to keep it quiet, from disinformation to, some exotic ways of just hiding things. Like I said, the installation itself was buried in the side of a mountain, and, you know. I also know that there's lots of nonsense information that has gone around, and whether it was started by the Navy or military or whoever's at the absolute bottom, you know, of the project. And I truly suspect that be the case, because, look, disinformation is the most powerful, you know, way to distort facts. You just throw a bunch of useless stuff out there, and, you know, they just take the real facts along with the nonsense and bundle it together and say, well, this is just impossible, and, you know, there, your security is maintained. But I also know that at some point they've examined or had bodies of alien creatures somewhere. So I know that stuff for a fact. And that's the bottom line.
Pretty cool to hear him talk about it 25 years after he said it the first time. Just so I get an idea, who hasn't seen that footage of mine? Anybody hasn't seen it? Okay, so you're seeing it for the first time today. I'm glad. I mean, isn't that cool? Aren't you stoked on that? It's like, man, you know, it's like Elvis meets Bigfoot. You can never find him or he's dead. You know, there's always a rumor he's dead. And all of a sudden, I got him on camera. I have proof Bob Lazar exists. And not only that, but he's not backing down. He's doubling down. He hasn't changed his story. He's telling you now the same thing he was telling you then. I find that really interesting. And it's different when you can see someone has aged and they're a little bit more confident. They're not like a geeky 20-year-old kid. Now they're just a geeky adult. But they've changed. And so that little bit of footage was the first step, the first taste I got of, fuck this, I'm going to find out the truth. I'm going to do my best. Because this story's too big. It's too important. And look, I've already got him once on camera. Maybe down the line, 5 years later, I might be able to do some more filming with him, right? And really, I'm doing this to bring it to you because you're seeing it just like I'm seeing it. You now have 3 more minutes in which to judge Bob Lazar by, right? And that's all I was trying to do, was get more data into the stream so we can make a more educated opinion on if his story is true or not. The crux of his story is about a place called S4, Site 4. This is a place that nobody had ever heard of. There is not one mention in the public realm, not even private circles. No one around that time had ever even heard about it. Yet, things were different back then. And George Knapp called Nellis Air Force Base, and they admitted that they had an S4, if not multiple S4s. Wouldn't tell them what they did there. Now they just completely deny it, right? We thought. But George got confirmation there was an S4. So Bob somehow knew things. He somehow knew that on Wednesdays at 8 p.m. over this tiny little lake bed that's not even part of Area 51, that there would be a test flight of something that looks identical to a flying saucer. And he took people out there on a variety of occasions, and they filmed it. Right? How did he know that? That's probably a real guarded secret, wouldn't you think? You know, the existence of a secret little sub-base of Area 51, you figure not everybody would know that. So I'm already kind of intrigued that he knew things that really he shouldn't know if he didn't work out there. S4 is kind of the key, and I'll show you little clips about that. You've brought S4 into the forefront. It's been confirmed to you directly from the base maybe 25 years
ago, yeah.
S4 has been confirmed to me directly twice. One from an employee of EG&G. Security was daunting. And then somebody else who's confirmed to me, S4, that that's exactly how it looks.
The story, though, is that there was a facility like that at Papoose?
There is a facility like that at Papoose. Flying discs, not this UFO term that's created to make it ambiguous, flying discs, saucers, that were piloted by non-humans. They were not ours, and this was confirmed by both of my sources, that this technology is not ours. Bob Lazar's story was confirmed to me by those two same sources. One saying that when he was working in secret capacity at White Sands in 1989, that it was common knowledge at the base about Bob's story. And I said, well, what was the believability, the general believability? And he said, everybody knew that what was going on out there were with these types of projects, and they all believed Bob's story.
And were they following it as it's unfolding in 1989?
That was the impression that I got, was that it was big news. If you ever see it, if it's soundless, noiseless, it's hovering, anti-gravitic, or appearing to be the way, it is not ours. And I said, not ours like America? And he says, not ours like humans. So this is about 25 years after Bob's story, and I started digging into it and started pulling up and calling up a bunch of the people who have advised my work in nanotechnology and in aerospace stuff and in investigations in general. The highest ranking military individual I've ever met has been someone that has advised my work for a while, was in position to know, and I've had multiple confirmations that Bob Lazar is telling the truth, and that S4, as he described it, existed exactly like he described it and for the purpose that he described it. So I've got all these independent, personal confirmations that there's a grain of truth to Bob Lazar's story. It was driving me crazy. So I sat down with George and went through with him, showed him he knows who some of the people that advise my work are. He's satisfied with it. I'm satisfied with it. So we're getting direct testimony from people, not for public consumption, not for me to go on radio shows and talk about it, not to put them in movies, but just to inform my work. People that care about me and my work too. So it really started to intrigue me, because now all of a sudden it's not just one person saying this thing, but 25 years later I'm getting independent, personal confirmation of the facilities Bob said he worked at. And that wasn't happening 25 years ago. So that was pretty cool. Everybody's focused on Area 51. We know the great things that were achieved at Area 51. It's a shell game. It's a sleight of hand. We're talking about S4.
Right.
And we're talking about the acknowledgement of a secret base called S4 that has special projects there, extraterrestrial projects.
Well, I got confirmation from Nellis Air Force Base, so I called their public information office. This is back in 1989. We're working on this. Do you have a place called S4 on the Nellis Range? And they said yes. Can you tell me where it is? No. Do you have more than one? Yes. Can you tell me what goes on there? No. It's classified. So we know an S4 exists. We know classified work goes on there. We know that they're not going to tell us any more about it. No one had talked about a place called S4 in public before Bob Lazar. There's no printed records of it. It didn't appear in a newspaper story. He's the one that told it. How did he know? How did he know that those test flights were going to take place 3 weeks in a row? There'd been no news stories, not in UFO circles, about test flights of something that looks like a flying saucer over Papoose Lake. That happened 3 weeks in a row. They took people out there. I've interviewed all the witnesses who were there, and they've got it on videotape. How did he know? Well, maybe somebody told him. How ridiculous that is. Maybe somebody told him, but it's important that Bob didn't go to MIT. How ridiculous is that? Here's videotape of a flying saucer flying over a secret base the government has never acknowledged, and the important point of this is Bob didn't go to MIT? It's ridiculous. How about the main, you're sort of burying the headline. The headline is Flying Saucers at a Secret Base. there they are on video, and we're quibbling about whether he has a degree or not?
George Knapp calls up Nellis Air Force Base. Do you have an S4? And they say yes.
Yeah. We hadn't gone with our UFO stories. They weren't on. The only thing that had been on the air was John Lear on the record, and then this Dennis interview, the interview with Dennis. So I wasn't quite the UFO guy that I am now. And actually, the guy I talked to, the public information officer at Nellis, is somebody that I knew.
If we called and you said, does S4 exist?
I could try. I mean, I could certainly ask them. Whether they'd still answer or not, I don't know. You'll recall 25 years ago, they would answer questions about UFOs. You know, they might keep you on the phone long enough to figure out if you're crazy or not, but at least they'd talk to you about it. They don't talk to you at all. They won't have that conversation with you. Whether they'd answer that S4 question or not, I don't know. We could try. We're calling Nellis Air Force Base a public affairs office. And that's who I called 25 years ago. We'll see if they will confirm for us that they have an S4 out there. Or where. I suspect we're going to have trouble, but we'll give it a try. Hi, my name is George Knapp. I work with Channel 8 News, and I had a question. I'm not sure if you can answer it or who might be able to answer it. I'm trying to figure out if if you can confirm that there is somewhere on the Nellis Range a place called S4, a designated S4, a facility.
S4?
Yes.
S4. Hold on 1 second.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Hi, Airman. My name is George Knapp with Channel 8. I was calling to see if, and I don't know if you can tell me this or not, but whether you have something on the Nellis Range called S4, a site or a facility or a location designated S4.
Called S4?
Yep.
I have no idea. I can try to get an answer for you.
That'd be awesome.
I would have to contact, see, maybe Red Flag, but yeah, let me write down some of your information. What's a good contact number for you?
This number here.
George Knapp, Knapp.
Right.
Okay. So you're looking for a zone on the range called S4.
Yeah, I'll just let you know that I'd been told some years ago that there is a place called S4. They wouldn't tell me where it was, but in fact, you might have more than one. Like S4
okay.
Meaning Site 4.
Site 4.
Right.
And what about Site 4 are you looking into? What's the significance?
I'd want to know if it exists. We had been told that there had been classified work going on out there. One version of the story is that there was a facility near Papoose Dry Lake that was called S4. There's another version of the story that you've got a place at Tonopah Test Range.
Okay.
And I just didn't know if you can confirm one way or another.
Okay, when are you trying to get this information?
Anytime. There's no deadline.
I will try to get in contact with somebody at the range and see if they're familiar with an S4 and whether or not the information is releasable, or because I've never heard of it personally, but we'll find out.
I appreciate it, Airman. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right, bye.
Yeah, so, it's just kind of interesting. He already confirmed it decades ago. We were just wondering what the climate of the situation was now. And I could, tell you this story, but it's much more fun to show it to you. I make films anyway, right? So I can talk about it, but showing you how these things go, there's a little bit of humor in it. So we waited for a call back, and we weren't very hopeful. We didn't think they were going to call us back. Back in the day, George knew the public affairs guy. This time, we don't know who we're talking with. The kid didn't even sound like he knew much of the base, so we don't know what kind of information we're going to get. They called right back and left a message. It was the next morning. Yesterday, you called to get Nellis Air Force Base to confirm S4 as a physical location. The one by the Papoose Lake bed is the one we're interested in. And you've called back before a lot of this was secret, and you got direct confirmation. Yes, a facility exists. We can't tell you anything more about it. So we get a guy on there yesterday, and he's like, I have to go ask people that would know. And you get a voicemail back the same day.
Right.
It was yesterday, and let's hear what the voicemail is.
Hey, sir, how you doing? It's Sarah from Nellis Air Force Base. I'm calling to get you the information you requested earlier today. I spoke with the Nevada Assessment Tip Training Range headquarters, and they let me know that on none of their maps in possession have a location that depicts S4 or Site 4 as a designation. So that's what I can tell you right now. So if you have any further questions, be sure to let me know when you get a chance. Other than that, have a good day.
So a couple things. One is that 25 years ago they did confirm not only they have one, they had more than one S4. They wouldn't tell me where it was. They wouldn't tell me what goes on there, but they said it is a real place. And I've got that from other people who worked out there, not just Lazar. Secondly, it was the parsing of the language is what I thought was interesting. We talked to the people at the range, and they don't find it on any map. Well, it's not going to be on any map. It wouldn't be on any map even if it was, even if it existed. And so just saying that it's not on any map is not the same as saying it doesn't exist. It's a very specific kind of truth. It's a new day and age dealing with public information officers, and not only for the Air Force, but every federal agency, is that they are where you go for information, and you never get to speak. Unless you get their permission, you never get to speak beyond that.
It's like fishing as a journalist. You want to see where the level of secrecy is, and why S4 is important is because S4 is linked to all of these special projects that we've been looking into dealing with the extraterrestrial presence.
Yeah, being able to confirm that there really was an S4, which is where Bob Lazar said he worked, goes a long way toward establishing that his story was true, because it had never appeared in any newspaper, it wasn't on any map. That's what he claimed. So when Nellis told me, yeah, we've got an S4, but we're not going to tell you where it is, that was a really big deal. I don't necessarily think they're lying to me. Maybe this guy doesn't know. Maybe they don't call it S4 anymore. Maybe after all that stuff with Lazar came out, they changed the name. Who knows? But I just thought it was really interesting that the parsing of the language to say, we don't see it on any map.
Yes, that's just a fun little look into one of the ways that we can go about getting nothing from our government about these facilities. But it's kind of fun, and you do learn a lot along the way. It is interesting the way questions are answered are sometimes very telling. And the guy was kind of chuckling actually when he had said, we don't have any, maps with that designation on it. Yeah, he knew it was a BS answer to get around having to answer. So basically, there's a lot of controversy, but what is the proof when it comes to Lazar's claims after all this time? What stands the test of time? I'm not going to go over every finite detail on what people think is or is not true about the Lazar story. There are, a few interesting things. This is just a copy of it, but one of the things I went through is this box of archives and photographs, and Bob would I could pull any box out of his garage, and he did not, have anything to hide. He was just like, go for it, look through it all. But this was like a pay stub he got, and people say, well, why is it for so little? And it's because he's just getting started with a job, and they pay so little at the beginning, it's not that much money. Even this has been hyper-analyzed, and people trying to see, is it real? Because the name of the department is different than that's an older department. So there's all these tiny little things that people like to go through and try to see, does it add up? But none of it adds up to, is Bob telling the truth or not? Like his schooling. Bob has always claimed that he went to MIT and that he went to, he got a degree from MIT, and there's no way to prove that. Bob's not offering proof. We can't find proof. Okay, so let's just say he lied. Let's just pretend he lied. I don't, by the way, that's not my position. I'm just saying, let's just say he lied. Let's say he was homeschooled and just had no education. Okay, well, does that change the fact that he worked in scientific capacity at Los Alamos? No, that's established fact. And I'll tell you why it's established fact now. I actually made sure it was established fact. But the point is, we can go back to when he was a baby. Okay? And it's like, is that going to change? Is this true about this story, about what he's telling us now? And so that's kind of what I'm interested in. I really don't care if he was homeschooled by gnomes. I care if he worked at Los Alamos. How did Bob walk George Knapp through one of the most secret and locked down facilities in America at Los Alamos, going into the Maison facility with cameras? How did that happen? It's like people try to belittle the story because they're afraid of the implications, maybe. Let's stick to what we know. Bob tried recreating what the badge looked like so that other people could recognize it, maybe. And then people say, oh, you made a fake badge. He goes, yeah, I made a replica, so you're welcome. So you would know what it looked like. I mean, just all these crazy stories. I see tape up there on the right by his name. Yeah, he made a badge replica so you could see what it looks like. He also did diagrams and drawings of, these are on napkins. He's famous for napkins. I have a stack of napkins from Bob, okay? So this is one of the first drawings he did back in the day of where the saucer out of the 9 that he claimed he saw, the one that he dubbed the sports model, that's where it was. And he kind of drew it out so people could see what it looked like from what he's telling. These are drawings, I don't know if people have really seen some of these, but he saw a bunch of different shaped UFOs, but from a distance. So he saw there were 9, but some of them, he called that one the Jello mold, the one below that the top hat. He called that one the light bulb. He doesn't even remember it now. He's like, oh, yeah, that was weird. That one was weird shaped. But they were all kind of down this corridor. He only got to see the one. Little known parts of his story, very elaborate. One time, in that section where he goes, I was inside one. He's talking about a UFO. He goes, I was inside of one. And I said, well, Bob, was that cool? That's got to be really cool, right? And he goes, no, it felt ominous. He goes, it was so weird. First of all, everything is gunmetal gray. There's not any other color. Everything is rounded. There's no corner or edge. It was like an injection mold. He goes, but it felt ominous because I stepped in and the seats weren't for grown men. They weren't for normal grown men, human size, right? They were small. And he says, that was the moment when I realized, this is weird. We ain't in Kansas no more, Toto. Something's weird here. It kind of dawned on him. And then I think kind of the light display that came up with the alien writing probably sunk that right in. At one point, they were operating on a little piece on the ground, and this display came up where a side of the craft that he was inside to look at a very specific part of the propulsion system. There was this rounded window part, and it just went transparent, but not like even glass. It was just clear, so he doesn't know if it was there or not there, but on that was very strange writing, to us. We don't know what kind of writing it was, but he tried to kind of show what it looked like. It kind of looked like amoebas, he didn't know, and eyes, but it was that's kind of a replica of what he saw. Have you guys seen that before? So there's all these details to a story that are just not well known because we get the bullet points, okay? Another thing that he avoids talking about, because it's so bizarre, but he read all of these briefing documents. That was one of the times he went out there, was they just had him read through all these documents. And he wasn't sure if it was a test or a joke. He doesn't really know what's going on. But he flipped through pages and saw photographs, and he tried to draw one thing that he saw on the left, which was an autopsy page of a being. And he doesn't like to talk about it. He actually drew this, though, from memory. And I love it. He goes, that's all I know. You'll have to make up the rest. Because he said that's what everybody does. They just insert bullshit. He's like, that's what I know. That's what it looked like, to the best of my ability. So he read all these documents. He goes, I don't know if they were true. It's like you reading a piece of paper. Do you know that's true? He goes, I didn't have my hands on that, so I don't know that's true. But there were tons of things that he read in these documents. Bizarre things. Back to how the hell did Bob know? Okay, this drawing on the right, that was done by Bob right after one of his visits to the base, when he happened to see on the bus a strange airplane they said worked on a methane fuel, and he said it sounded like it was tearing open the sky. Turns out, we now know he drew the back of the Aurora, which is still a very secret plane that was being tested out at Area 51 at the time he was out there. How did Bob know? How did he know it worked on methane propulsion? How did he draw the back of it correctly if he was never there? Again, it's really annoying, isn't it? Because all these things are kicking you in the ass like, ugh, I want to believe you, but I want to know the truth. I'm starting to believe you. So then I found someone willing to speak with me after 25 years from Los Alamos. After all these years, everybody's making jokes that Bob was the janitor at Los Alamos. He never worked there. Okay, he's in the phone book. I've talked to a bunch of individuals that knew him from working with him there, but I couldn't go public with it. Finally, I found a brave individual who was willing to talk to me on the record about working with Bob Lazar at Los Alamos in scientific capacity, being in briefings, classified briefings, which, by the way, the janitors are not invited to, the highly technical classified briefings, with Bob Lazar, and his name was Dr. Robert Krangle. I have all of his documents, all of his paperwork from all the contracts that he did during that time period at multitude of bases, including Los Alamos. During that time, Dr. Krangle's telling the truth. I can prove it. What was your impression of what Bob was doing at Los Alamos in the 80s?
I didn't know what he was up to any more than he knew what I was up to.
But you did know that he was a physicist.
Yes.
And that was very clear to you, that he was a physicist at Los Alamos and not, again, like the janitor.
Right.
So he worked there. And he went on record with me and says, of course you remember Bob. Bob was the jet car guy. He was a rock star. He looks like Mick Jagger. How can you not remember Bob? I remember Bob. Bob was cool as shit. And yeah, he worked at Los Alamos. Big deal. I'm like, big deal to who? It's a big deal, man. And he goes, why? And I'm like, because he's got a bigger story, and everybody says a good link to that is, did he work at Los Alamos? Because if he worked at Los Alamos, there is a possible reason he could have been picked up to work on a highly classified project through EG&G to go to the test site and work on this non-terrestrial stuff. And Dr. Kringle was like, okay, whatever. So I got him on record. The guy's a really funny guy, really smart. And next thing you know, I publish it. Next day, I should have warned him. He starts getting inundated by calls by Stan Freeman. Just inundated. You know, I mean, God, you know, I love Stan. Stan and I like him. We totally disagree. Because Stan's wrong. So, yeah. So he attacked Dr. Krangle on the phone, trying to belittle what Dr. Krangle said. He goes, Jeremy, what did you do? This guy keeps calling me. All I did was tell you a little thing, and he won't leave me alone. I'm like, yeah, he's looking to try to discredit you because he's invested in it not being true about Bob Lazar. I said, just tell him what you told me. Tell him the truth. So anyway, you know, any way you get around it, here's a physicist, worked at Los Alamos, in scientific capacity, was in security briefings with Bob Lazar. Make of that what you will. Now for my most exciting part of this story. This is the thing that really gets me. Has everybody heard of element 115? Okay. So you've heard about that because of Bob Lazar. There's no other reason you would have heard about that back in 1989. Very obscure, an element that we theorized, you know, we might be able to, you know, create a few atoms of one day. Element 115 is a huge part of Bob's story because it's a very specific part. He said that he was told, 500 pounds of element 115. In fact, if you remember his story, that was the fuel source for the gravity wave amplifier. And this sounded like total science fiction. And everybody said, oh, it's very unscientific what Bob's saying. All he said was that there was an element that was yet to be fabricated by humans that is super heavy and has this potentiality to create as a fuel source for these saucers, and it runs off of that. Well, it's pretty wild because we can't fabricate. At that time, we couldn't at all. But to this day, and actually we will never be able to, and there's reasons why, we cannot fabricate stabilized element 115 in any significant quantity. Now, the argument that people make about element 115 is that, okay, you're right, okay, we fabricated some, we have a few atoms of it, sure, but it's completely unstable, just milliseconds and it's gone. Well, Bob always said, well, he recently said, he goes, yeah, that's true, he goes, but there is an isotope or isotopic combination that will stabilize it. Just because we haven't found it, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I called up some physicists at UCLA, at Berkeley, a couple in Russia, and I started asking them. They're specialists in isotopes and they're specialists in elements. One of them was very familiar with 115. Across the board, none of them wanted to talk about UFOs. That was made very clear to me. This is not about UFOs, is it? Nope, it's about element 115. Okay, cool. Totally unwilling to talk about this on the record, but consensus. They all said, yeah, we absolutely cannot rule out a stabilized form of element 115. There's probably an isotopic combination because it is theorized that as you move into that realm, it becomes stabilized for a long duration of period. We can't rule that out, so it is not pseudoscience to say that's a possibility. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I know some like physicists who are like, that's pseudoscience, you know, what Lazar is saying. Well, apparently, that's not the common thought. It's not. So I don't know why people like scream that all the time. So it is within possibility that that is true. Now, a sensitive part of the story is that Lazar described this very specific way in which this element 115 was machined at Los Alamos for use in the saucers. The guys machining the 115 at Los Alamos didn't know what it was. It would be shipped to them something called LA 1000. That's what they would ship back and forth, and that was the 115. Bob alleged that at one point he got some element 115 out of the lab, out of Los Alamos. Yeah, can you imagine? Now, that's problematic. Why did Bob claim that? Whether it's true or not, we'll get to that. Why did he claim that? Well, if his story is true, he was in serious danger. That is precisely why he went on the news with George Knapp. In fact, I wish I could have seen this. I wish I could have filmed this. The last second when George is about to reveal Bob's identity to the public on the news, Bob and George start wrestling over the tape. They're in the news station, about to go live to air, and he's like, doesn't want George to air this tape. He is scared shitless what's going to happen when people recognize his face. And George is like, dude, you're already out. We tried to protect you by putting you kind of out there under your boss's name. Not a smart choice, Bob. Dennis, that caused some problems. But so if his story's true, he's being threatened. What is the one thing that could prove his, well, there are a few things that could prove his story. I actually believe Bob could prove his story. I don't think he wants to. I think he wants you to know the story, but he doesn't want you to know for sure he's telling the truth. That might cause problems for him. But let's just say it's true. The one thing that would save his ass, his trump card, would be having element 115 stashed somewhere, right? Making sure somebody knows where it is. Dude, that's proof positive. So if we're deciding to believe his story right now, wow, that's a twist right there. And he did claim it. I'm not saying anything out of line, but you notice he hasn't talked about it in 20-something years, probably 25 years, hasn't even mentioned it, because it was a sensitive topic. You might have heard that he was once raided in New Mexico by a multi-agency raid. They were looking for something. And that is a story he doesn't like to bring up because it traumatized his life. Can you imagine? So you're at home, right? You have your wife and your animals and all this stuff, and your house is just fucking raided, and they're looking for something, which you don't have, right? Okay, so I'm going to show you this. This is not element 115, okay? This is just aerogel. Just say that first. Okay, but this is a piece of aerogel before anybody knew what aerogel was, that they used to package around the LA 1000, which is element 115. This is actually a piece from the 115, which may or may not have come out of the lab. It's turned yellow over time, right? But this is a piece from that packaging material, which is so funny because nobody knew what aerogel was back then in 1989. So they thought it was extraterrestrial. They're like, oh man, it comes with the 115. It must be alien. You know, they had no idea. It turns out, you guys ever seen aerogel? It's like light as smoke. It's amazing. It's like insulation or something. It's light as smoke. And it's just this little clear, it doesn't even feel like you're holding it. It's really strange. Anyway, so this was part of the actual packaging from the LA 1000. And, look, this is Bob's story in a nutshell. He's the element 115, the flying saucers, the government secrecy, coming forward because he was scared for his life and annoyed at all of the secrecy. And it's really kind of sad, actually, what happened, like how he why he decided to do it. I don't know he would do it again. I don't know he'd come out again. I think he would have loved to continue working on those projects if he worked on them, right? I think he would have loved to continue it. I got to bring back to one thing that George has said to me, and I showed you the other day, which is it's the duty of journalists and scientists to investigate the unexplained, not explain the uninvestigated. What does that simply mean? It's just we need to look at the things we don't know, not try to explain them as if we know them. And so I've got a couple more clips for you that I think you'll find interesting.
The idea that Bob was a disinformation agent or part of a program to mislead the public is wrong. He's not. And I can say that after knowing the guy for a quarter of a century. The story he told then is the story he tells now. He didn't add to it. He's not making it more elaborate. He's not remembering new parts of it. It's the same story. It's consistent all the way through.
So that's, impactful when somebody kind of tells the same story over 30 years. There's some merit to that. It's not changing. One thing we know for sure is real is the impact that Lazar has had on ufology and the world. And I love the way George says it.
And just think of the things that in the 25 years since Bob came forward with the story, there are those who it drives them crazy that he gets attention, that he is obviously a phony, he didn't go to MIT, he made this stuff up. I'm sorry, but they lost. Bob won. You look at how far that story has traveled. When you've got President Clinton on Jimmy Kimmel talking about Area 51 and aliens, and then a week or so later, President Obama says, hey, by the way, at an event for Shirley MacLaine, he mentions Area 51, and I'm the first president to say it in public. Look at what has happened since Bob came forward. The government has acknowledged there is a place called Area 51. For a long time, they denied it. They pretended that the base that everyone could see didn't exist. We know that there is a place called S4. They confirmed it to me. Nellis Air Force Base told me that there was one. We know that there is something called element 115. They've synthesized it. It's not exactly as Bob described it, but as he says, there are different isotopes. You can make different kinds of different versions of it, and eventually we might be able to make one that's more stable. The scientists who made it talked to Bob. They called him. The ones that synthesized it the first time were in contact with Bob, asking him questions about 115. The Area 51 meme has gone everywhere. It's in the Da Vinci Code. It's in National Treasure. It's in Independence Day. It's in the X-Files, the books, the TV shows. It is part of our culture all over the world. Our baseball team is named the 51s. We got the extraterrestrial highway. On a table on the other side of this room is 50 or 60 products that are being sold, product lines, different kinds of trinkets and collectibles from Area 51. Bob did that. That's from Bob. That's from Bob Lazar. That's why this story caught on. That's why it went worldwide. It is now part of our shared collective experience and knowledge, and it's not going away. So it must drive his detractors crazy, those people who think he's phony, because they lost and Bob won. Aldous Huxley said, facts do not cease to exist merely because they're ignored.
Okay, so you're pretty thoroughly up to date now on the Bob Lazar story. We could go into finite detail about any of the specific claims or what arguments people have for or against. I'm pretty well versed in it at this point. I pretty much know and have interviewed and talked with everybody involved from the beginning, but also have uncovered new stuff. And so that's what my film will be showing you. It's coming out December, hell or high water, that's my deadline. So it's coming out December. So this story has really just begun. And I'm going to take you in the movie through some areas of Bob's life which nobody has ever really been able to see. I've been able to verify some things that have been big question marks for 30 years. Bob's life was not traditional. I mean, he was kind of an outlaw. He's a weirdo, man. And then he had this like jet car, right? Just blowing fire. He still builds jet bikes, by the way. He built me a flamethrower. I live really remotely in the desert, so it's totally safe, dry lake bed, besides maybe blowing myself up. But he still likes to do and make these incredible things. So he had a multitude of jet cars, still has this jet bike he takes around, still draws on napkins, and, still looks like the same guy. That's kind of an interesting photo, right? That's from one of our filmings. Different glasses, same dude. I'll play it. I have just like a 1 minute clip and a 1 minute clip of just audio, so you can hear maybe why Bob is deciding to allow me to bring his story forward again. I think it's important because you understand why it's happening, so you can just listen to this one. The biggest roadblock to understanding is the ability to dismiss someone because you don't see them as human, as a person. So what pisses you off?
I mean, disinformation and lies and attacks that have no basis in reality. I mean, you can disagree with me and say, hey, I don't believe that. That's fine. I haven't presented you with enough information. I understand that. I'd probably be in your position. But don't fabricate stuff. There's some important information that needs to be released. And everybody needs to understand the truth to it and not distorted versions of it. You really need to pay attention to what I'm saying, because I have better things to do than come up with this. I'm not interested in doing this. I don't like being in the public eye. I don't got money for doing this. And quite frankly, I could make up a better lie, but I have no motivation to lie. This hasn't helped me out. It's something that it's information that I'm releasing, and that's it.
It's not an ordinary life.
That's one thing I would like. I don't like living in a James Bond movie. I like watching James Bond movies.
Yeah, I mean, one of the most striking things about Bob as a person is he does not waste his time on bullshit. You know, it's like he could make up a better lie. Would he? No. I asked my wife one time, I said, what do you think of Bob? You know, because she thinks I'm crazy. You know, what do you think of all this? You know, she's like, yeah, he just doesn't seem somebody that would like waste his time with stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, for 30 years, wouldn't waste his time? No. Wouldn't waste 30 seconds of his life. So that was, that's the kind of impression you get from him. I have one more piece of audio, and you can kind of see why he's probably letting this happen now. People have been trying to minimize who you are. People have been trying to trivialize who you are. People have been trying to twist your story based on absolutely absurd things. That's got to wear on people to a point. You got to set certain things straight.
It's time to pull things out by the roots, just to get things reset and get people familiar with the story and who I am, and this is what's true. The divergence has increased just over time. I'm trying to tell you exactly the way things were and what I was exposed to. You think there's something more secret than that the flying saucers are a cover-up for? Some of this stuff just sounds crazy to me, and I understand. I'm biased because I'm behind my eyes and see everything, but this is crazy shit.
Yeah, so I think it gets kind of annoying, getting trolled and, by people and, oh, you're such a liar. Why are you holding all this information back? Holding what back? I've told you everything. So I think that people inserting fantasy and fiction and their own opinions, altering and distorting his story is precisely why he's letting this happen now. You're going to hear his story again, and then I'll have some updates as I was able to uncover some pretty interesting stuff. So to kind of conclude this part on Bob, because you're really going to see it in my film, I do have an exciting announcement, which is nobody has seen this yet. This is a little, maybe 2-minute trailer with some new footage. We get to hear from Bob very, very recently. And of course, I've done tons of filming, but you got to wait for my film. But I can show you this little piece. They're using it at Cannes Film Festival to get the movie out to market, which is pretty neat. So, first time ever, just a little clip to, again, update how much information you have on Bob Lazar. Exciting.
good comes from the UFO field for him. This is a reluctant UFO messiah. It changed his life.
This week, we've heard the contention of UFO researchers that there's a secret government within our government.
Well, there's several, actually 9 flying saucers, flying discs that are out there of extraterrestrial origin.
The live interview with the shadowy Dennis drew international attention. Portions were broadcast by radio in 6 European countries and in a nationally televised TV special in Japan. Despite numerous inquiries and feelers, Dennis has remained anonymous until now. His real name is Robert Lazar. He says he was hired to work at an area called S4, which is a few miles south of Groom Lake. At S4, he says, are flying saucers, antimatter reactors, and other working examples of technology that is seemingly beyond human capabilities.
I did not believe that this should be a security matter. Some of it, sure. But just the concept that there's definite proof. We even have articles from another world, another system. You just can't not tell everyone.
It was like a Twilight Zone episode. It just kept getting stranger. The fact that it was happening at all was the weirdest part. Look, it's been 30 years, and all of a sudden you raised it to this level. You know, this is a powerful technology, fearsome technology, and you just don't want everyone to have it. It'll become obvious how to make constructive as well as destructive devices from it. It's my only guess as to why they have never released information. It's kind of difficult. Once you release the technology to be analyzed and give it to everyone, they can just run with it. You really can't keep the weapon potential hidden. You really can't. Look, with ET technology, you can literally rule the world.
Well, I am telling the truth. I've tried to prove that. What's going on up there could be the most important event in history. You're talking about contact, physical contact and proof from another system, another planet, another intelligence. That's got to be the biggest event in history, period.
And it's real.
And it's real and it's there.
I'm so excited for this film to come out. I'm so excited to actually make the film. I still have so much to do. I have to edit the whole thing. But this is the story that I've always wanted to tell. You know, since I first started looking into the idea of UFOs, I want to know, like you, is Bob telling the truth? Because if he is, if any of that is true, it is game-changing. And I got to tell you, through my movie process, we're closer to the truth than ever before, but you're going to have to decide for yourself, because somebody telling you something is not as good. But there'll be a lot coming out in that. I'm so excited to be able to bring that to you, because like just as a fan of this, I would love to see the movie myself. So all of my work, for those of you that haven't met, never seen my work before, you can spend weeks at extraordinarybeliefs.com, but there are tons of videos and clips and everything from my films, investigations, and reports. I hope you enjoy it. You know, I make it so that everybody can just watch it for free. That's the point. You know, the films are what I do now for a living, which is great. Hopefully that works out. But everything is on that website for you to just go to, enjoy, and experience. Again, I'm not trying to tell you to believe or not believe. I'm just trying to provide you a little bit more information. Hopefully, those 2 clips of footage, one I know nobody's seen before, give you a little bit more insight, and the movie will provide even more than that, because it is a very important story. Yeah.